name is Brandy Pauline. I represent my future brand, 23 Motivation. I'm a voice for the voiceless. I want to travel the world shining a light in the dark to bring the lost and broken back home. You guys could have been anywhere today, but I believe God positioned you right where you're sitting. I believe there's a message that He wants you all to hear. So whether you oppose or support the message, I'm just grateful that you took the time out to listen to me today. I will be speaking about an unconventional walk with God. I will share a few personal stories and some insights into the LGBT community. My goal is to fill a gap between Christianity and build a bridge for the LGBT community who crave a closer relationship with God, but don't know where to start. My first story I have for you is about growing up. As a toddler, my grandma would sit me on her knee and read me stories of the Bible and talk to me about Jesus. Sadly, she passed when I was 4, but she planted seeds that would impact me so greatly later on in life. At age 5, I found myself in a near life and death situation. I was playing next to water and this wave swept me up. I felt this warm sensation in my chest, and I looked up and I seen all these colors that you'd never see before in this world. This lady reached out her hand and told me to come with her. I told her I didn't want to go. She let go of my hand and told me to breathe deep. I know I met my angels that day. And again, it would affect me later on in life. You can imagine as a young child, I had no idea what that was. But having flashbacks later on in life would prove that it was a life-saving tool later on. Now my family, they weren't really religious. That was unless they were saying, God, please make this car start. Or God, please help me pay these bills. But never walking with Him as a friend. Never having a close personal relationship. And definitely not going to church. I remember being about 9 years old and asking my dad, how come we don't go to church? He's like, Brandy, we're not getting into that. We're not doing it. Don't worry about it. I never questioned my father, so I carried on. At 16 years old, I found myself at a football game, kissing a girl under the bleachers. This was the first time I truly felt like myself. This was the first time that everything made sense to me. You see, I always knew I was different from a young age. I knew I liked girls, but I didn't know what that meant. Now, the next day at track, I looked down at my watch and I realized I was running really, really late. So I went into the locker room a little bit early to get changed for work. These girls came in and they said, hey, Pauline, I heard you're a bleep. We know the F word they called me. And before I knew it, there was 3 of them beating the living snot out of me. I wish I could go back and tell that 16-year-old girl that this was going to happen time and time again. Thankfully, I've only been physically beat down one time, but I've been emotionally beat down my whole life for this situation. I know that being a lesbian for me was not a choice, but I was born this way. Martin Luther King said that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And I believe you're doing yourself an injustice if you don't just love the skin you're in. I don't think people realize that being a lesbian or in the community is only 10% of who I truly am. I'm a mom, a sister, a daughter, a friend. I might even be your coworker. I want to come home to a loving family like everyone else. I pay my taxes and I go to work. You should never have to apologize for simply being yourself. I want you guys to take a second and think back to a time where you were unloved or unwanted for simply being you. How did you feel in that moment? The truth of the matter is, we all go through it. It's just that some of us get it worse than others. The next story I have for you is about finding God. How many of you guys remember COVID? Yeah. Sadly, I don't. Isn't that crazy? So in February of 2020, I got a phone call I'll never forget. They said, Brand, she's gone. That phone call was telling me that I just lost my aunt. She was the one person who loved me unconditionally. She always believed in me. I think it's fair to say that as much as my parents love me, they would constantly tell me, Brandy, we don't agree with your life choices, and this isn't how we raised you. Or you were pretty before you cut your hair. You were pretty before you dressed like that. But the truth is, I was a tomboy my whole life, and my aunt knew it. When I came out to her, she said, Brandy, I knew you were. It's okay. Don't worry, baby. God loves you anyhow. That was a relief to me, even though at this point I still didn't know who God was. About a month after, in March, my girlfriend of over a decade looked me in the eyes, told me she didn't love me anymore. She took our 2 little boys and she left me. The air left my lungs that day. I went from seeing my boys every day of my life to, if I was lucky, once a month. This affected me so deeply that I started drowning myself in alcohol. Drink after drink, day after day, until November of 2023, my actions caught up with me. I found myself at my lowest point, crying in the snow, asking God, why did you do this to me? What, are you even real? See, at the time, he was a fictional character to me, kind of like the Easter Bunny. And I cried out to my grandma too. I said, Grandma, I need a safe place to call home. I can't do this anymore. I can't do this on my own. I was homeless at the time. And almost instantly, I felt this sense of overwhelming peace. And I heard this still small voice that said, pour it out and don't you ever touch it again. I poured that bottle out and I got out of the snow. The next week, I found myself at a friend's house telling her what happened. She was kind of chuckling too, like, okay, we'll see if you get sober, we'll see if you can do it. And the fact of the matter was, her friend overheard the whole situation. She was also at the house. I have never met this lady. She said, Brandy, I have a place for you to call home. I had to take a step back. I was like, whoa, wait a minute. I tried to talk her out of it. I said, I just got a job. I have no credit. I have 2 dogs. You don't want me, and I didn't even apply for no place. She said, I don't care about your 2 dogs. We'll work with you on the money. And don't you worry, you have a place to call home. I knew this was the hand of God. There was no question. I was at the right place at the right time, and he showed out for me, just like he did in the snow that day. But nothing humbled me more than when I got in the driveway. I now lived on Owlet Avenue. What's so significant about that? That is my grandmother's first name. I knew God was showing me. He said this isn't no joke. It's true what they say. He's close to the brokenhearted. And I'm a walking testimony of what he can do if you let him into your heart. This was the first time I decided to let him into my heart fully and understand that he wasn't a fictional character. He was definitely not the Easter Bunny. I knew that something needed to change. So in November of 2024, I went to church for the first time. I was scared. It kind of felt like there would be a target on my back. I knew how I had been treated at work, in school, with my family, and even my friends, even my LGBT community were like, are you nuts? Do you know what churches do to people like you? Are you crazy? And I didn't care because I knew what God did for me. Now this place was very loving and accepting at first. And I wanted to start getting more involved in the church, and I must have ruffled some really bad feathers. The next sermon that they preached was about homosexuality and how it was a sin and how we perverted the Bible. But they made no mention of pornography, adultery, or any other sin, just focused on that point. I felt the air leave my lungs once again in life. I went home and I asked God, why would you bring me this far to leave me now? I know you told me to go to church. I listened. Why are you leaving me? But then I realized that God is love, and that was not the hand of God. He wouldn't do that to me. I knew something had to change, but I didn't know what. Sorry, I gotta get a drink real quick. The last story I have for you is how God never gave up on me. He never left my side during this entire time. I started having flashbacks of my angels, and I knew what he did in the snow. So I reached out to a well-known trusted doctor, and she told me about Pastor Erica. And Pastor Erica reached out to me, and she assured me this church was the best. And that we don't act like that here. And as scared as I was, I wanted to be close to God, and I wanted to be in a community with people that could teach me and show me about God. I am very grateful to say and honored that you guys are an amazing church, more than I could have ever even imagined. But I wonder how many more of my family, my LGBT family, are running around confused, isolated, lost, and broken. Jesus came to offer salvation to all. He would leave 99 sheep to go find one lost one. Shouldn't we all feel accepted? I wonder how much life would change if we just loved and accepted everyone and let God be the judge. The Bible says that we are beautifully and wonderfully made. Let's leave the rest up to God. We have enough to do down here. The last thing I want to leave you here with today is about my grandma planting that seed as a toddler. Whether you are 2 or 2,002 years old, if you have air in your lungs, there's a purpose for your life. I believe that God called you here today to relight that spark that I know you all have. I believe that He called us not just to welcome all, but to accept all into His church. Now, you have the knowledge and the wisdom and even a few personal stories to catch you up with today's times. And I just wonder, will you plant some seeds of faith, knowledge, and wisdom to your grandchildren and your future bloodline? Or will you spoil the holy ground with arsenic? I want to do a special shout out before I end this message to my beautiful fiance, Venetia, who has sat here and dealt with my speech a million times. She probably can recite it better than me. And I want to thank you guys so much for having me out here. I love you all so much you don't even understand. And to God be all the glory. Thank you.